industry increasingly moves toward adoption of 5G, 2 and 3G spectrum are being repurposed. Joining us now to talk about multi-spectrum issues and multi-band networks is Chris Nicoll, the principal analyst of ACG Research. Chris, let's talk about the whole efficiency of multi-band networks and how well are they working?
So that's one of the challenges that operators face today. It's one thing to refarm spectrum, but as you refarm the spectrum and you start using carrier aggregation to get larger and larger channels, you also build some inefficiencies into the system. You start stacking guard band channels, for example, and you can be losing 1 to 1.5% of your capacity, up to even 10% of your capacity, because you've got all these channels that are put together, but they're put together relatively inefficiently. This is where Huawei SuperBAND really comes into play. And this is where we see some of the innovation happening in the network that Huawei is really leading. By being able to remove those guard bands and adding back that 10 or 15% of the spectrum, you're improving the user experience, you're improving your download speed significantly, so you're making the network more efficient with the existing resources it has for LTE, even before you get to 5G.
And you're seeing most of this repurposing is being done for LTE. Take the 2 and 3G spectrum and use it for LTE.
Yeah, absolutely. LTE is one of those few technologies that's really lived up to its name, which was long-term evolution. We've seen the speeds go up, which is where carrier aggregation comes in, but we've also seen it kind of absorb those legacy technologies, which the 2G and 3G technologies individually weren't able to do. The challenge is when you start doing that, you start also building in some of those old inefficiencies as well.
Sure. So when operators are working on carrier aggregation, what are the challenges that they face when they start to do this stuff?
So one of the old kind of acronyms and things that we use for the network is the highway system. And we kind of compare the two. And carrier aggregation works the same way. You've got lanes of the highway that now you're starting to put together. But where you get inefficiencies is, sometimes traffic stays in one lane, so other lanes aren't as well utilized. But again, this is where SuperBAND really comes into play. By spreading traffic out over the different bands or assigning traffic to those spectrum bands used for carrier aggregation, you again get more network efficiencies, higher throughput. And the idea of network efficiencies and better user experience is you're getting traffic onto and off of the network much faster.
And that's Huawei SuperBAND is what actually allows that to happen much more efficiently.
Yeah, LTE is a standard, 5G are standards, but what we're seeing from the vendors, and Huawei is one of the leaders in this area, is how do you build in efficiencies even within those standards? So things like SuperBAND, which impact the network, but don't require any changes to the UE devices, so the smartphones, the tablets, and that's very key. If you have to change that user device, that's just insurmountable. That doesn't work. So the network changes and make those efficiencies come into play are really important.
Excellent. Chris, thank you very much for your time today. Thanks.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Cheers.